The smell of lilacs was the first thing that hit me. Not real lilacs, but the chemical kind they pump into ballrooms to cover up the scent of floor wax and desperate anxiety. It was suffocating. Or maybe that was just the corset of the navy blue dress I had paid for myself. I sat at table 9. The table was shoved so far into the corner that the waiter had to turn sideways to squeeze past my chair. I looked down at the place card. Vera Sutton. The font was 2 sizes smaller than the ones on the head table. I noticed things like that. I am a forensic accountant. I notice when things do not match. 180 guests. Crystal chandeliers refracting the late afternoon sun into jagged rainbows on the white tablecloths. The clink of expensive champagne flutes. The low rumble of a DJ testing the bass for a first dance I would not be part of. At the head table, my stepsister Kristen stood up. She looked beautiful. She really did. The white dress flared around her, the silk catching the light, and on her left hand a 2.1-carat cushion cut. Diamond flashed like a warning signal. She linked her arm with her new husband Austin, and they began to circulate. The room turned toward them like sunflowers tracking the sun. They moved from table to table, accepting compliments, laughing that breathless laugh of people who have never had to count the cost of their own happiness. Then they reached table 9. Kristen stopped. She swayed a little champagne glass tilting dangerously in her hand. Her face was flushed with wine and adoration. She looked at me. She smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, the kind that cost nothing. "Vera," she said. Her voice carried. It always carried. "Oh my God, I did not even see you back here." "Congratulations, Kristen," I said. My voice was steady. It is always steady. She leaned in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper that was loud enough for the 3 tables nearest us to hear perfectly. "You know what, actually this table is kind of reserved for Austin's family now? His uncle just showed up and we are short on seats." She laughed a bright, brittle sound. She looked over her shoulder at her mother Pauline, who was watching from the head table. Pauline gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "You do not mind finding another spot, right?" Kristen said, turning back to me. "Just go find another table, adopted girl. There is plenty of room in the back near the kitchen." Adopted girl. She said it with a laugh like it was an inside joke. Like it was funny. A few guests nearby chuckled, that nervous, wet sound people make when they are uncomfortable but want to be on the winning side. Austin looked down at his shoes. His jaw tightened. He did not say a word. 4 tables away, my stepfather Don set his glass down. I saw him do it. I saw his shoulders stiffen. He heard. I knew he heard. But he picked up his fork and stared at his plate, pushing a piece of chicken around in a circle. He did not look up. I sat there for exactly 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. I stood up. My legs felt cold, but my hands were steady. I picked up my champagne glass. I looked Kristen in the eye. "Enjoy it," I said. My voice was low level, not for the room, just for her. "It is the last thing I will ever pay for." She blinked, her smile faltering. What I set the glass down on the table. Hard. The stem snapped. I picked up my clutch and turned my back on her. "Wait," a voice said. It did not come from the head table. It came from table 14, nestled among the guests from the groom's side. A man stood up. He wore a blue blazer and khaki pants. He looked like an accountant or a high school principal or nobody at all. "Just a moment, mister," Sutton the man said, his voice projecting across the room with the flat authority of a slamming door. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a leather case. He flipped it open. A silver badge caught the chandelier light. "I am going to need about an hour of your time," the man said. "Monday morning." Don's face went gray. Not white, gray. The color of old ash. Pauline's hand clawed into the white tablecloth, her perfect French manicure digging into the fabric. Kristen looked from her father to the man in the blue blazer, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. I did not wait to see the rest. I walked toward the exit. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor. Click, click, click. I walked out of the ballroom and into the cool evening air, leaving the lilacs and the lies behind me. 4 months earlier. The numbers on my dual monitors were green and white and brutally honest. It was Monday morning, 9:20, and the coffee in my ceramic mug had gone cold 2 hours ago. The mug said I heart spreadsheets. My boss Margot had given it to me as a joke, but I used it every day because it was the most accurate description of my life I could find. I was working on the Riverview medical audit. It was a mess, a beautiful, tangled mess. 2 other accountants had spent 3 months trying to find the leak. I had found it in 3 hours. $89,412. I highlighted the cell in red. They had billed for 340 knee replacements in a single fiscal year. The facility only had 2 operating rooms. Unless they were performing surgery in the parking lot, the math was impossible. Margot leaned against my doorframe. She pushed her reading glasses up onto her head, her sharp eyes scanning my face. "You found it," she said. 89,000, I said, not looking away from the screen. "Creative use of medical codes." She nodded. "You free for lunch?" I brought something, I said. I always brought something. A granola bar. Leftover rice. Whatever prevented me from spending $12 on a salad. I was 36 years old, made a senior accountant's salary, and lived like a college student during finals week. "That is not what I asked," Margot said. I finally looked up. She was studying me the way I studied balance sheets, looking for the discrepancy. Nothing, she said. Just, "You look tired. More tired than usual. Don call you?" My hand went instinctively to my left wrist. To the watch. It was an old men's watch leather strap worn soft, the crystal face scratched near the number 4. It ran 3 minutes slow. I never adjusted it. "Sunday dinner yesterday," I said. Margot waited. She knew better than to push. I did not elaborate. I did not tell her about the silence at the table or the way the pot roast tasted like ash. My phone buzzed on the desk. The screen lit up. "Dad." I stared at it. "Vera, can you call me tonight? Important family news. Dad." He still signed his texts, Dad. Always had, even as he slowly stopped being one. Important family news. Plus a request to call. That equation always solved for the same variable. Money. I turned the phone face down. I looked back at the monitors. The numbers were clean. They made sense. Input equals output. Debit equals credit. Crime equals punishment. Numbers did not call you sweetie and then ask for a check. Numbers just sat there waiting to be counted. I highlighted another row in red. The night before, the air in the Westerville house had smelled of rosemary and slow-cooked beef. It was the smell of my childhood, or at least the version of it I tried to keep alive. I let myself in. I had a key, but I always hesitated before using it. I stood on the porch for 5 seconds listening to the muffled sounds of the television inside before I turned the lock. "Hey, kid." Don was in his recliner. He looked up from the football game and gave me the nod. The dad nod. It was a small dipping of the chin, a tight smile that didn't show teeth. It was the crumb of affection I had lived on for 28 years. "Hey, Dad," I said. Pauline was in the kitchen. She did not turn around when I walked in. She was on the phone, her voice high and bright, the voice she used for people she wanted to impress. "Oh, absolutely," she was saying. "We are looking at venues now. It has to be perfect." She was chopping carrots on the granite countertop. The kitchen had been remodeled 6 years ago. Stainless steel appliances, custom cabinets, a farmhouse sink that cost more than my first car. I looked up at the shelf. The recipe box was there. Dark oak. Smooth. I reached up and touched it. The wood was warm from the heat of the stove. Grace's recipe box. It sat there like a relic from a lost civilization. My mother Grace had died when I was 5. That box was one of the few things of hers that remained in this house. Pauline used the recipes inside, but she never said Grace's name. I set the bottle of wine I had brought on the counter. It was $22. Better than what they usually served. "Oh, thanks," Pauline said, finally hanging up the phone. She glanced at the bottle but didn't touch it. "We have plenty open already." She moved the bottle to the far corner of the counter where it would not be opened tonight. Dinner was a study in subtraction. The dining table seated 6. There were place settings for 3. Dawn, Pauline, and me. But under Dawn and Pauline's plates were the nice embroidered placemats, the ones from Pauline's mother. Under my plate was a plain beige square. I noticed. I always noticed. I never said anything. We were halfway through the pot roast when a ringing sound cut through the silence. Pauline scrambled up from the table so fast her chair screeched against the floor. "It is Kristen," she announced, beaming. She took the phone into the living room. Dawn followed her. They sat on the couch, huddled together over the small screen, laughing. "Oh, honey, that is amazing!" Pauline shrieked. "Let me see," Dawn said. His voice was warm, warmer than it had been when I walked in. I sat alone at the dining table. The pot roast was cooling on my plate. I could hear them, but I could not see the screen. Kristen was my stepsister, 3 years younger than me. She lived in a world of yes, while I lived in a world of maybe. 15 minutes later, they came back to the table. They looked flushed, excited. They sat down and picked up their forks. Later, I would realize they had been celebrating the engagement that entire dinner. The FaceTime call, the flushed faces, the whispered excitement. They had known since Saturday. They just did not think to tell me until Dawn needed my checkbook. After dinner, I stood at the sink washing dishes. It was always my job. The warm water soaped over my hands, over the watch I refused to take off. I looked up at the shelf, at the recipe box. "Which recipe did you use?" I asked. Pauline was wiping down the table. "What? The roast," I said. "That was hers." There was a beat of silence. Heavy, thick. "It is my recipe now, Vera." Pauline said, her voice flat. "I have made adjustments." Don was back in his recliner. He turned up the volume on the television. He said nothing. I dried my hands. I put on my coat. Don walked me to the door while Pauline stayed in the living room. "Thanks for coming, kid," Don said. He lowered his voice, leaning in slightly. "You know, your mother would be proud. How well you turned out." I froze. My hand was on the doorknob. "Which mother?" I asked. Don flinched. It was barely visible, a microspasm of the eyelid, but I catalogued it. "Grace," he said. "I mean Grace. She was good about money, smart, made sure you would be taken care of. Family does not steal from family." She knew that. "Family does not steal from family." He said it without a trace of irony. He looked me in the eye when he said it. I drove home on the highway with the windows down, the January air cutting against my face. I replayed the sentence in my head. Family does not steal from family. Back in my apartment, I sat on the beige sofa I had bought secondhand. It was clean, organized, silent. A single framed photo sat on the nightstand under the lamp. A Polaroid, colors fading to sepia. A woman with dark hair and tired eyes holding a baby. Grace and me. My phone rang. I looked at it. Dad. I hesitated. I let it ring 3 times. Answer as the daughter, or answer as the accountant. I answered as the daughter. I always answered as the daughter. "Hey, kid," Don said. "You got a minute?" "Yeah," I said. "So big news," he said. "Kristen and Austin, they are engaged." He paused, waiting for my reaction. "She said yes yesterday. Austin did the whole thing. Nice restaurant, got the ring." "That is great," I said. "Tell her congratulations." "Well, that is actually why I am calling," he said. I could hear the leather of his chair creaking as he shifted. In the background, I heard Pauline's voice faint, but sharp. "Just tell her, Dawn." "The wedding is in May," Dawn said. "Kristen wants something special. Pauline has been looking at venues and—" My stomach tightened. I knew where this was going. How much, I asked. There was a silence. 30,000 would cover most of it, Dawn said. We would pay you back, of course. Eventually. Eventually. The word hung in the air between us. Eventually was the word Dawn used when he meant never. Eventually was a timeline that stretched out into infinity. $30,000. I closed my eyes. I did the math. I had $41,000 in my savings account, every penny I had saved since I started working at 22. If I gave him 30, I would have 11,000 left, and they would have a party. But that was not the math that stopped me. $420,000. That was the amount of the life insurance policy my mother Grace had left when she died. $38,000. That was the check Dawn had handed me when I turned 25. That is what is left, he had said. After your schooling, clothes, food, you know. I gripped the phone. Oh, Dawn said, mistaking my silence for hesitation. Okay, sure, take your time. No rush. What did she say? Pauline's voice hissed in the background. Night, Vera, Dawn said. Night, I said. I hung up. I stared at the phone. Then I stared at the Polaroid of Grace. I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter. I opened my laptop. I closed the Riverview medical audit. I opened a new blank spreadsheet. My hands were cold. I typed into the first row. Mass Mutual Policy Number LF 4421890. I looked at the cursor blinking in the empty cell next to it. The counting had begun. The engagement dinner was at Olive Garden, Pauline's choice. I sat at the end of the table, the seat closest to the kitchen door. The occasion was the engagement. Kristen sat in the center of the booth, radiating the kind of happiness that takes up physical space. She held her left hand up to the pendant light, twisting it so the diamond caught the glare. It is a cushion cut, she told the waitress who had stopped by to refill the breadstick basket for the second time. 2.1 carats. I looked at the ring. My eyes narrowed slightly, an automatic reflex honed by 11 years of auditing assets. Cushion cut, good clarity, platinum band. In a retail setting like Morrison's or Jared, a stone of that size and quality would run between $18,000 and $22,000. Austin, her fiancé, sat beside her. He was an insurance adjuster who drove a 5-year-old Ford. I knew roughly what insurance adjusters made. $22,000 was half his annual take-home pay. Dad helped Austin pick it out, did you not? Dad, Kristen chirped, leaning her head on Dawn's shoulder. Dawn smiled. It was a modest, aw-shucks smile. I know a guy, he said. Pauline patted Dawn's arm, her French-tipped fingers claiming him. Dawn has excellent taste, she said. She looked at Kristen, then at the ring, then back at Kristen. Her eyes skipped over me entirely, as if I were a potted fern in the corner. It is beautiful, Kristen, I said. I leaned forward, forcing the muscles in my face to form a smile. Really, I meant it. It was a beautiful object. I also meant that $22,000 had to come from somewhere, and the math at this table did not add up. Austin made eye contact for the first time. I hear you are an accountant, he said. That is cool. Forensic accountant, I said. I find money people do not want found. The table went quiet for a beat. Pauline recovered first. Well, somebody has to do the boring jobs, she said. When the bill came, nobody moved. I reached out and took it. $187.43. Pauline watched me put my card down without making a single motion to stop me. In the parking lot, the night air was cold. I sat in my Honda Civic and watched them walk to their cars. Pauline linked her arm through Dawn's. Kristen leaned against Austin. They looked like a unit, a closed circle. I opened my wallet to put my receipt away. Inside the clear plastic window was the Polaroid, Grace holding me. She looked so young, younger than I was now. I looked at the photo. Then I looked at the memory of the ring on Kristen's finger. My mother left $420,000. I received $38,000. Kristen was wearing a ring that cost more than half of what I received from my mother's entire life insurance policy. I started the engine. I did not turn on the radio. I drove home in silence, counting the mile markers, letting the anger settle into a cold, hard knot in my chest. The next day was Sunday. I drove to Westerville in the afternoon. I knew the schedule. Pauline took Kristen to look at flower arrangements on Sundays. Dawn watched football in the den. I let myself in the side door. The house smelled of lemon pledge and sawdust. "Hey, Dad," I called out. "Hey, kid," he shouted back from the den. "Game is on." "I need to find my birth certificate," I said, "for a work thing. Is it okay if I check the cabinet?" "Yeah, sure," he said. "Just lock it back up." I walked down the stairs to the basement. The basement smelled of raw wood and dust. In the corner stood the filing cabinet, old industrial green with a dent on the side from 28 years ago. I knelt on the concrete floor and reached under the workbench until I felt the tape. The key was still there. I peeled it off. It was small and silver, tarnished with age. I walked to the cabinet and inserted it into the lock. It turned with a grinding sound, metal against metal. I pulled open the top drawer. House deed, car titles, current insurance policies. Nothing I did not expect. I opened the second drawer. Tax returns, 2015 through 2023. I pulled out my phone and photographed each one, my hands moving with practiced efficiency. Click, flip, click, flip. Then I opened the bottom drawer. This was the junk drawer of documents. Old warranties for appliances that broke 10 years ago. Instruction manuals for VCRs. A box of Christmas cards from 1998. I reached behind the Christmas card box. There was a manila envelope. It was yellowed at the edges, the paper brittle. On the front, in handwriting that made my breath hitch, was a label, Vera, Mass Mutual. It was Grace's handwriting. The loops were round and generous, written in the purple ink she always favored. I sat down on the floor. I placed the envelope on my lap. My hands were steady now. Forensic accountants do not shake. Daughters do. But I was not being a daughter right now. I opened the clasp. Inside was the original Mass Mutual life insurance policy dated 1990. Policyholder Grace Ellison Sutton. Beneficiary Vera Grace Sutton. Death benefit $420,000. I turned the page. There was a separate sheet of paper. Trust distribution instructions. 50% into education fund for Vera. 30% into savings account for Vera's first home. 20% discretionary for Vera's care. Clothing, medical enrichment. And there in the margin, underlined twice in that same purple ink, was a note. For Vera's education and future. All of it. Dawn, please. Please. I stared at the word. It was a plea from the grave. She knew. Even then she knew he was weak. She had begged him. I pulled out the last document. A disbursement record from Mass Mutual. $420,000 paid to Donald Ray Sutton, trustee. June 1994. June 1994. I was 5 years old. My mother had been dead for 3 months. $420,000 arrived in Dawn's account. When I was 25, Dawn gave me $38,000 and told me that was what was left. $382,000 does not evaporate. It goes somewhere. Finding where money went was literally what I did 8 hours a day. I photographed every page. I checked the lighting to make sure the handwriting was legible. I photographed the note in the margin 3 times. Dawn, please. I put the documents back exactly as I found them. Envelope behind the Christmas cards. Drawer closed. Cabinet locked. Key taped back under the workbench. I walked upstairs. The football game was still roaring from the television. "Find it?" Dawn asked, not looking away from the screen. "Yeah," I said. Found exactly what I needed. Good, he said. Drive safe, kid. I looked at the back of his head. His hair was thinning gray strands mixing with the brown. He looked like a gentle, tired man. A man who would give you the shirt off his back as long as it didn't cost him anything. Night, Dad, I said. The word tasted like metal in my mouth. It was the last time I would ever call him Dad without it being a lie. I drove back to my apartment. I did not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. To the left was the Riverview Medical Audit, a grid of someone else's theft. To the right was a new spreadsheet. Row 1, Mass Mutual Policy Number LF4421890. Disbursement $420,000. June 1994. I reached for the Polaroid of Grace and propped it up against the screen. For Vera's education and future. All of it. I worked through the night. I built the framework. I mapped the years. I prepared to hunt. Monday morning, I walked into Margot's office. I closed the door behind me. I had never done this before. My personal life was a sealed vault, and Margot was my boss. But she was also the only person I knew who understood the language of theft. I sat in the chair across from her desk. I placed my hands flat on my thighs. I need to ask you something, I said. Not as my boss. Margot put down her pen. She took off her reading glasses and let them hang by the chain around her neck. She looked at me, her face unreadable. Okay, she said. If I found evidence that someone diverted funds from a trust, I said. Not a client. A family member. What would the procedure be? Margot did not blink. Depends on the scale, she said. Amount, $382,000, I said. The room went very quiet. The hum of the ventilation system seemed to get louder. Margot leaned back in her chair. She cleaned her glasses with the edge of her blazer, a slow, deliberate motion she used when she was thinking. That is your mother's money, she said. It was not a question. You knew I asked. I suspected, she said. 4 years ago when you told me Don gave you $38,000 from a 420 policy. I am a forensic accountant, Vera. I can do subtraction. You did not say anything, I said. It was not my place, she said. It had to be your decision to look. She put her glasses back on. You are looking now, she said. I nodded. I found the original policy instructions. She specified all of it. He took it. Margot sighed. It was a heavy, weary sound. I need you to hear something before you start, she said. Because you will start. I can see it in your face. I waited. My father did something similar to my mother's estate, Margot said. I was 32. I went to war. I won. In court, I won everything. The house, the accounts, the apology, at least on paper. She looked me straight in the eye. You know what I lost, she asked. What Thanksgivings, she said. Christmases. A father. 3 siblings. The illusion that I was loved without conditions. I won every dollar, and I lost every person. And some nights I am not sure I got the better deal. I looked at the framed diplomas on her wall, the sterile perfection of her office, the silence of her life that mirrored the silence of mine. She was warning me. She was telling me the cost of the truth. But Margot did not know what I knew. She did not know that the cost of not looking was worse. It was eating pot roast made from my mother's recipe by a woman who erased my mother's name. It was watching a diamond ring sparkle on my stepsister's finger, bought with money my mother saved for my future. It was 31 years of sitting at the end of the table. I am going to look, I said. Margot nodded. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small cream-colored card. If it goes where I think it will go, she said. Sliding the card across the mahogany desk, you will need this eventually. I picked it up. It had a federal seal embossed in gold. Neil Whitfield, Special Agent, IRS Criminal Investigation Division. I slipped the card into my pocket. It felt heavy like a loaded weapon. "Thank you," I said. I walked back to my desk. I sat down and looked at the dual monitors. I touched the pocket where the card sat. The threshold was visible now. All I had to do was cross it. 10 days passed. The documents from the filing cabinet sat in a password-protected folder on my laptop labeled RE Personal. I had not opened it. I had gone to work. I had come home. I had reheated rice for dinner and watched the light fade across the floorboards of my apartment. I had not called Dawn. Dawn had not called me. The $30,000 request hung between us like a held breath, a silence that grew heavier with every passing hour. On Wednesday evening at 7:15, my phone rang. It was not Dawn. Pauline. I stared at the name on the screen. Pauline never called me. Pauline delegated communication to Dawn the way a CEO delegates layoffs to middle management. If she was calling, the timeline had accelerated. I picked up. "Vera," she said. "No greeting, no pleasantries. We need to finalize the wedding budget. Dawn said he spoke to you about helping." Helping. That was the word she used. Not giving, not paying, helping. He mentioned 30,000, I said. 32, actually, she said. The venue raised their quote for the catering package. "We want the filet mignon option, not the chicken." "It is a wedding, Vera. We cannot serve chicken. It was not a request. It was a revised invoice." "I need some time to look at my finances," I said. "Kristen is counting on this," Pauline said. "We all are. You know you are the only one in the family with that kind of savings." She paused. It was a calculated silence, the kind used by people who are deciding whether to say the quiet part out loud. She decided. "Your mother's insurance certainly helped set you up," she said. "The least you can do is give back to the family that raised you." The air in my living room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Your mother's insurance certainly helped set you up." $38,000 out of $420,000. That was her definition of setup. There it was. The sentence I had been waiting 11 years to hear. She actually believed it. Pauline either did not know the real number, or she knew it and thought I was too stupid to do the math. "I am a forensic accountant, Pauline. Math is the one thing I do better than be quiet. I will let you know by the end of the week," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used in audit rooms when I found a discrepancy that would send someone to prison. "The deposit is due Friday," Vera, she snapped. "We cannot wait for you to end of the week," I said. I hung up. It was the first time in my life I had ever hung up on Pauline. My hand was shaking just a little. I put the phone down on the coffee table. I walked to the kitchen and opened my laptop. I stared at the folder labeled RE Personal. I right-clicked. Rename. I typed 5 letters. Grace. I stared at the folder. This was the last moment I could stop. If I opened it now, Don stopped being Dad. He became a respondent. He became a subject. I took a breath. I double-clicked. Thursday morning, I arrived at Barlow and Fleet at 7:15. The office was empty. The motion sensor lights flickered on as I walked down the hallway, clicking like the tumblers of a lock. I was wearing my navy blouse. Margot called it the executioner's blouse. It was what I wore when I had to tell a CEO that his CFO had been embezzling for 5 years. Today, for the first time, I was wearing it for myself. I cleared my desk. I moved the Riverview files to the floor. I turned on both monitors. I reached into my bag and pulled out the Polaroid of Grace. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I turned it face down on the desk. I could not look at her while I did this. Not yet. I opened a new spreadsheet. Step 1. The request. I drafted a formal Freedom of Information Act request and a direct inquiry to Mass Mutual for the complete disbursement records on policy LF 4421890. As the beneficiary, I had a legal right to see where the money went. As the trustee, Don had a legal obligation to show me. He had failed. Now I would ask the institution. Step 2. The net worth analysis. I logged into the Franklin County Auditor's database. It is public record. Anyone can look. Most people just do not know where to click. I pulled the deed history for the house in Westerville. I pulled the tax liens. I pulled the mortgage satisfaction documents. Then I started on the bank accounts. I did not have access to Dawn's current statements, but I had the account numbers from the tax returns I had photographed in the basement. I could not see the transactions yet, but I could see the existence of the accounts, the dates they were opened, and the institutions that held them. I started building the timeline. 1994. Grace dies. 1995. A joint account is opened at Huntington Bank in the names of Donald Sutton and Pauline Greer. 1 year after my mother died. 1 year before Pauline officially moved in. I was typing so fast the sound was a continuous rattle like hail on a tin roof. You started. I stopped. I did not look up. Margot was standing in my doorway. It was 9 o'clock. I started, I said. What is your scope? She asked. Full net worth analysis, I said. Income versus known expenditures. Don makes roughly $70,000 a year as an HVAC manager. He spent $140,000 on Kristen's college tuition alone. If the output exceeds the input, the delta has a source. I know the source. Margot walked into the room. She closed the door. She sat down in the client chair. How far back? She asked. 30 years, I said. She let out a low whistle. You are going to need more coffee, she said. I am going to need a bigger spreadsheet, I said. Margot took off her glasses. 2 things, she said. 1. I am not your boss for this. I am your ally. Whatever you need. Access to the proprietary databases. Paid search credits. Time. It is yours. After hours. Thank you, I said. And 2, she said. Her voice dropped an octave. Whatever you find, Vera, it cannot go back in the box. You understand that. Once you see the numbers, you cannot unsee them. I looked at the face-down Polaroid on my desk. There was never a box, Margot, I said. There was just me pretending not to see. I turned back to the screen. The Mass Mutual inquiry was drafted. The cursor hovered over the send button. I clicked. The email vanished. Sent. Irreversible. Mass Mutual would process it. The records would arrive. The numbers would appear. And numbers, as I knew better than anyone, did not lie. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday night, the printer in the corner of my living room was rhythmically spitting out pages. I sat cross-legged on my beige couch. My laptop was on the coffee table. The spreadsheet was open. It now had 14 tabs. I had poured myself a glass of wine. I had not touched alcohol in 2 weeks, but tonight I needed it. The Mass Mutual records had arrived as a secure digital file at 4:30 that afternoon. I had printed everything. 47 pages. The Mass Mutual records were 47 pages of clarity. I tracked the flow. Mortgage payoff, joint account with Pauline, home renovation. I had suspected all of it. Then I turned to 2006. My breath caught in my throat. $52,000 disbursed from the trust-linked account. The memo line read, College Fund. I was 17 in 2006. I was applying for scholarships. I was working nights at a diner. I did not get a college fund. I looked at the recipient bank routing number. I traced it. It matched the payments made to Ohio State University. But not for me. For Kristen P. Sutton. I stared at the line. I read it 3 times. My mother's money paid for Kristen's college. $52,000 from Grace Ellison's life insurance went to educate Pauline Greer's daughter. I had eaten ramen in a dorm room with a broken radiator. I had worked 2 jobs while taking a full course load. I thought the money was gone. I thought there was nothing left. It was not gone. It was in the room down the hall where Kristen lived in the honors dorm and never worked a day in her life. I picked up my phone. I dialed Margot. It was 10 o'clock at night. She answered on the second ring. The college fund, I said. My voice was flat. The flatness that is scarier than screaming. "What about it?" Margot asked. "My mother's money paid for Kristen's college," I said. "Not mine. Kristen's." Margot was quiet for 5 seconds. "Keep going," she said. "What else?" "The ring," I said. "What ring? Kristen's engagement ring," I said. "The 2.1 carat cushion cut." I traced it. There was a withdrawal from the trust-linked savings account in October of last year. Exactly $22,400. A cashier's check issued to Morrison Fine Jewelers. I took a sip of wine. It tasted like vinegar. "Don told everyone he helped Austin pick it out," I said. "He did not help pick it out. He bought it. Grace's money was on Pauline's kitchen counters. Grace's money was on Kristen's diploma. Grace's money was on Kristen's finger. $38,000 for Vera. The leftovers. The crumbs." I closed the laptop. I laid back on the couch and stared at the ceiling. I counted the cracks in the plaster. 1, 2, 3. I did not cry. Forensic accountants do not cry over numbers. They document, they cross-reference, they file. But daughters lie on couches at midnight and hold Polaroids and whisper to women who died 31 years ago. "I found it, Mom," I whispered to the empty room. "I found where it went. It went everywhere. It went to everyone. Everyone except you. And everyone except me." I sat up. I opened the spreadsheet again. I added a new tab. Total misappropriated funds. I typed in the sum. The number glared back at me, black and undeniable. Kristen's ring was Grace's money. The wedding I was being asked to fund was Grace's money. Everything was Grace's money. I looked at the phone. Neil Whitfield's business card was sitting on my desk, tucked behind the lamp. It was time. Over the next 2 weeks, the spreadsheet grew from 14 tabs to 23. By day, I audited clients. By night, I audited my father. What I found was not carelessness. It was a maze. Don had moved the money through layers of account savings to checking to cashier's checks to vendors. In forensic accounting, carelessness looks like a mess. Theft looks like a maze. Then I found the bomb. Trust funds generate income. Income generates tax liability. A trustee is required by federal law to file Form 1041, the income tax return for estates and trusts. I searched the IRS public database of tax liens and filings associated with the trust's tax identification number. Nothing. 0. For 30 years, Donald Sutton had not filed a single Form 1041. He had not reported a dime of the interest earned on my mother's money. This was not just stealing from a daughter, this was stealing from the United States government. Margot had warned me. Above $100,000 in unreported income. The IRS stopped looking at it as a mistake and started looking at it as a felony. I sat back in my chair. The only light in the room came from the laptop screen. I looked at the Polaroid of Grace taped to my lamp. He never filed, I told her. He did not even try to make it legal. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Dawn. "Vera, honey, can we talk about the wedding contribution? Pauline says deposit deadline moved up." Dad. I read the text. Then I looked at tab 25 of my spreadsheet. I had cross-referenced the wedding venue's pricing with the withdrawals from the account that held the remnants of Grace's money. Don had already paid $47,000 in deposits. He was not asking me to pay for the wedding. He was asking me to supplement the money he had already stolen from me to pay for the wedding. Grace was funding the bride's side and the groom's side, and only one girl at the party knew the truth. I did not reply to the text. I closed the laptop. I drove to Westerville. I did not go in. I just parked down the street, sitting in the dark, watching the lights of the house. I could see Pauline's silhouette in the kitchen window. She was moving back and forth, cooking something, probably using my mother's pot. Probably using my mother's recipe. I watched for 10 minutes. Then I drove away. Saturday night, Margot and I sat at a booth in the short north. She had ordered a full bottle. Margot was strictly a one-glass woman. "You look terrible," she said. "I feel efficient," I said. She told me the rest of her story, the parts she had left out at the office. The siblings who called her jealous. The father who said her mother would be ashamed. The 2 years in court. The $340,000 she won back. "And then my brother stopped returning my calls," she said. "My sister sent me a typed letter saying I was not welcome at holidays. My father died 6 months after the settlement. My sister said it was my fault." She looked at me. "Probably was," she said. "Do you regret it?" I asked. She reached across the table and touched my hand, the one wearing Dawn's watch. "I regret that I did not do it sooner," she said. "I regret every Thanksgiving I sat at that table smiling while eating food bought with my mother's money. I regret every thank you I said for things that were already mine." She squeezed my hand. "But I do not regret the truth," she said. "The truth was the only thing that was actually mine." I looked down at the red checkered tablecloth. "What if I do not want either?" I asked. Margot raised an eyebrow. "What if I just want Grace to stop being erased?" I said. "What if I want someone, anyone, to say her name in that house and mean it?" Margot pulled her hand back. She picked up her glass. "Then you will need to say it yourself," she said. Wednesday afternoon, I sat in my car in the parking garage. I had held Neil Whitfield's card 6 times in 6 weeks. Today, I dialed the number. "Whitfield," a voice answered. "Agent Whitfield." "My name is Vera Sutton," I said. My voice was the voice of the executioner's blouse. "I am a forensic accountant with Barlow and Fleet Associates in Columbus. I would like to discuss a potential unreported trust fund disbursement and failure to file Form 1041 over a 30-year period. The amount in question is approximately $382,000. Silence. It lasted 3 seconds. "That is specific," he said. "Ma'am, can I ask, is this a client matter or a personal matter?" "Personal," I said. "The trustee is my father." Silence again. 2 seconds this time. "Ma'am, are you safe?" he asked. His tone shifted. It was no longer routine. "Is anyone pressuring you?" "No," I said. "I am not in danger. I have documentation going back 30 years. I would like to file a referral. We generally prefer these to come through Form 3949A, he said. "But given the documentation you describe, could you come to the Cincinnati office? I would like to see what you have." When I asked, "How is next Tuesday?" I opened my calendar app. "Tuesday, March 11th. I will be there," I said. I hung up. I put the card back in my wallet, sliding it behind the Polaroid of Grace. The federal agent and the mother back to back, both looking out for me in ways Dawn never did. I started the car. I drove back to work. As I passed the exit for Westerville on the highway, my phone buzzed. Another text from Dawn. "Vera, please call me." Something came up. "Important." "Dad." I did not reply. Sunday came. I drove to the house in Westerville for dinner. I knew it would be the last time. I parked in the same spot. I walked up the same driveway. I carried the same bottle of wine. But everything looked different. I did not see a home anymore. I saw a ledger. I walked into the kitchen. I looked at the granite countertops. $120,000. Grace's money. I looked at Pauline's Lexus parked in the driveway. $45,000. Grace's money. I looked at the roast sitting on the platter. $20. Bought by a household financed by a dead woman. Dinner was the same as always. Pauline dominated the conversation with wedding details. Kristen talked about the centerpieces. Dawn ate quietly, but I was studying them now. Dawn reached for the salt shaker. I watched his hands. They were large, rough hands with oil under the fingernails. Hands that had worked hard. Hands that had signed the disbursement form in 1994. You think about the wedding money, kid? Dawn asked gently. I am thinking about a lot of things, I said. Pauline looked up sharply. It is a yes or no, Vera, she said. I looked at Pauline. I really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the aggression. I saw the way she gripped her fork. She knew the lifestyle was fragile. She just did not know the wrecking ball was sitting at her table. The wedding is in May, Pauline said. I know when the wedding is, I said. I booked the venue. No rush, kid, Dawn said, trying to smooth the water. We will figure it out. We will figure it out. The phrase of men who want someone else to figure it out for them. I stood up. I took my plate to the sink. It was habit. It was duty. I washed the plate and set it in the rack. I looked up at the shelf. The recipe box was there. Dark oak, smooth. I reached up and touched it. The wood was warm from the heat of the stove. Mom's box, I said. What Pauline called from the living room? Nothing, I said. I took my coat from the hook. I walked out the door. I sat in my car for a moment looking at the house. Tuesday, I would go to Cincinnati. Tuesday, I would hand a federal agent the paper trail of 30 years. And this kitchen that smelled like grace but belonged to Pauline, would never feel the same again, to anyone. I put the car in gear and drove away. Tuesday was coming. The William Howard Taft Federal Building smelled like floor wax and old decisions. It was a sterile government smell, a mix of recycled air and industrial cleaner that stuck to the back of my throat. I walked through the metal detector in my stocking feet, holding my shoes in one plastic bin and my bag in another. The guard did not smile. He watched the monitor with the bored detachment of a man who had seen everything and cared about nothing. I took the elevator to the 7th floor. The hallway was lined with beige carpet that had been walked on by thousands of people who were either in trouble or looking to make trouble. I was the latter. I clutched the red binder against my chest. It was 3 inches thick. Inside, organized by year and transaction type, was the story of my mother's money. I had tabbed every section. I had color-coded every theft. Blue for the house, yellow for the cars, red for the transfers that vanished into the joint account. Neil Whitfield's office was small. It had a single window that looked out onto the gray concrete of a parking garage. There was an American flag in the corner and a framed photo on his desk of a woman and 2 golden retrievers. It was the office of a man who followed rules. I sat in the chair opposite him. I placed the binder on his desk. I placed my copy next to it. Neil opened the cover. I watched him read. I did not speak. In my line of work, you learn that silence is a tool. People rush to fill it usually with the truth they are trying to hide. But Neil was comfortable with silence. He turned the pages slowly. The sound of the paper turning was the only noise in the room. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 4 minutes. I counted the seconds. I watched his eyes scan the rows I had highlighted. I watched him pause at the section on the college fund. He looked up over his reading glasses. You built this yourself, he said. I am a forensic accountant, I said. This is what I do. This is what you do for clients, he said. His voice was mild, but his eyes were sharp. This is your father. He is the trustee who failed to execute a fiduciary duty over 3 decades, I said. My voice did not shake. I had practiced this sentence in my car. He is also my father. Both things are true. Neil nodded. He turned back to the binder. He stopped at the disbursement timeline. The college fund disbursement, he said. 2006. $52,000 to Ohio State. The beneficiary listed is Kristen P. Sutton. My stepsister, I said. And the trust was designated for, he asked, letting the question hang. Me, I said. Exclusively. Grace Ellison Sutton specified all of it. For Vera. Neil closed the binder. He leaned back in his chair. He tapped his pen on the desk 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. Ms. Sutton. "I need to be honest with you," he said. "This is one of the cleanest referrals I have seen from a private citizen. The failure to file Form 1041 alone is actionable. Combined with the trust diversion, the intent is clear." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a form. "We will open a case," he said. I looked at the form. It was Form 3949A. Information referral. Neil explained the process. The IRS would independently verify my documentation. If corroborated, they would initiate a formal investigation. Don would receive a notification letter, but not immediately. It could take 2 to 4 months. "This means you have a window," Neil said. "Between now and when your father receives notification, you decide how you want to handle the personal side. The legal side is ours now." He slid the form across the desk. I picked up the pen. It was a cheap ballpoint with the government logo. I looked at the field labeled victim. I wrote her name, Grace Ellison Sutton, deceased. Then I moved to the field labeled informant, Vera Grace Sutton. I signed my name. It was done. 30 years of silence filed in triplicate. I waited for the feeling of triumph. I waited for the rush of vindication, the heat of justice. I felt nothing. I felt clean. It was the feeling of finishing a difficult audit. The numbers balanced. The discrepancy was documented. Someone would act. But someone would act was not the same as someone would love you. A federal investigation was not a father. "The binder is ours now," Neil said. I stood up. I shook his hand. His grip was firm, professional. I walked out of the office, down the beige hallway, and into the elevator. I sat in my Honda Civic in the parking garage for 3 minutes before I started the engine. I called Margot. "It is done," I said. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I just finished the best audit of my career," I said. "And the worst." "Those are the same thing," Margot said. I drove home. 2 hours on Interstate 71. I counted the mile markers. I counted the years. I counted the cost. 4 days later, I was supposed to be finished. The case was filed. The binder was in Cincinnati. I should have closed the spreadsheet and gone back to my life, but I could not stop. It was Saturday night. My apartment was quiet. I sat at my kitchen table with the laptop open. There was one thread I had not pulled, one transaction I had not fully traced. The ring, 2.1 carats, cushion cut, platinum band. I had the date of Kristen's engagement, October 4th, 2024. I cross-referenced the account numbers I had pulled from Don's tax returns with the Mass Mutual disbursement records. The savings account ending in 442 had received the $60,000 trust transfer in 1996. Using Barlow and Fleet's financial tracing databases, I ran the account activity for October of last year. There it was, October 4th. A withdrawal. $22,400. A cashier's check issued to Morrison Fine Jewelers, Columbus, Ohio. I looked at the account number. It was the savings account ending in 442. I traced the history of that account back through the years. It was the account that had received the $60,000 transfer from the trust in 1996. The money in that account had grown over time. Interest, small deposits. But the seed, the root of it, was Grace's money. That account existed because my mother died. I opened the website for Morrison Fine Jewelers. I searched for cushion-cut engagement rings. The price range was $19,000 to $24,000. $22,400. I stared at the number. In 11 years of forensic accounting, numbers had never made me physically sick. This one did. "Your money is on Kristen's finger, Mom," and she called me adopted girl with that hand. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. I walked to the bathroom. I turned on the shower. I did not take off my clothes. I sat on the floor of the porcelain tub, fully dressed in my jeans and sweater. The water hit me. It was hot. It soaked my hair, my face, my clothes. It hit the watch on my wrist. Dawn's watch. The water pooled in the scratched face of the crystal. I did not cry. Not exactly. My body started to shake. It was a violent physical shuddering, like I was freezing to death even though the water was scalding. I wrapped my arms around my knees. I rocked back and forth. The forensic accountant shorted out. The daughter took over. For 47 seconds, I fell apart. Then I stopped. I turned off the water. I stood up, my wet clothes heavy and clinging to my skin. I wrung out my hair. I looked at the watch. It was still ticking. It was still 3 minutes slow. I stepped out of the tub. I dried off. I put on dry clothes. I walked back to the kitchen table. I sat down at the laptop. I opened a new tab. Tab 25. I typed a header. Wedding costs amount Vera has paid. I typed in what I had already paid. The catering deposit, the florist deposit, the photographer booking fee, the dress alterations for Kristen, the bridesmaid gifts Pauline told me to handle, the venue reservation I had put on my credit card 3 months ago because Don said he would pay me back eventually. The number stared at me. $28,600. Already spent. Already gone. I typed in the remaining amount Don was demanding. $32,000. Total $60,600. Total exposure $34,200. I added it to the master ledger. $382,000 plus $34,200. $416,200. They had almost taken all of it. Every last dollar Grace left me. And they were asking for the final $30,000 to finish the job. They did not know they were asking for Grace's money. Pauline knew. Dawn knew. But Kristen and Austin thought I was just generous. They thought I was the successful older sister with the good job and the empty life. Nobody in that family had ever asked where Vera's generosity ended and Grace's theft began. I knew where. I traced the line. It ran right through a 2.1-carat diamond. 2 weeks of false calm. Neil was working the case. I went back to client audits. 3 Sundays without dinner. Dawn texted twice. I did not reply. Friday afternoon, Margot stopped by my office. "You are efficient and dead this week," she said. "What is happening?" "Nothing." I said, "That is the problem." I filed. "Neil has it. I just wait." And waiting feels like what she asked. "Like the morning after you finish a big audit," I said. The adrenaline stops. The spreadsheet is closed. And you look up and realize you are alone in an office at 9 o'clock at night and nobody is waiting for you at home. Margot stepped into the room. "That is not about the audit," she said quietly. "No," I said. I looked at my hands. I won, Margot. On paper, I won. I have the truth. I have the evidence. I have the federal government on my side. I looked up at her. Why does winning feel like the night Dawn forgot my birthday? Why does it feel like sitting alone eating a gas station cupcake and wondering if I miscounted the days Margot did not answer? She knew the answer. I did not miscount. I never miscount. I just miscounted what I was counting for. I thought justice would feel like fullness. It felt like space. My phone buzzed on the desk. I looked at it. It was a text from Dawn. "Vera, please call me." Something came up. Important. "Dad?" I stared at the screen. Something came up. His voice was different. There were no emojis, no honey, no kid. The hair on my arms stood up. He knows. The false peace was over. The counterattack was coming. I waited 3 days to call him back. I spent those 72 hours rehearsing. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror reciting bullet points like I was preparing for a deposition. I anticipated his objections. I built an emotional firewall brick by brick. I told myself that I was not a daughter calling a father. I was an auditor calling a subject who had been notified of a discrepancy. On Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock, I sat on my beige couch. The apartment was silent. The Polaroid of Grace was face down on the coffee table. I could not look at her for this. I dialed. Dawn picked up on the first ring. He had been waiting. "Vera," he said. There was no greeting, no question about my week. His voice was heavy, lacking the usual warmth that I had spent my life trying to earn. "Mass Mutual sent me a letter," he said. I closed my eyes. I counted to 3. 1, 2, 3. "They said someone requested complete disbursement records on your mother's policy," he continued. "They said the beneficiary requested them." Silence stretched between us. It was the silence of a house settling before the roof caves in. "Vera, was that you?" he asked. "Yes," I said. My voice was steady. It was the only steady thing in the room. I heard the leather of his recliner creak. He was sitting up. For years, Don had slumped in that chair, letting Pauline navigate the world for him. Now he was sitting up. "Why would you—" he started, then stopped. He took a breath. "What are you looking for?" "The truth," I said. "The truth," he repeated. The word came out fractured. "Vera, I raised you. I put a roof over your head. I put food on the table. With whose money, I asked." The silence that followed was 6 seconds long. It was the longest 6 seconds of my life. "That is not fair," he said finally. His voice was quieter now. $420,000, I said. "Grace left all of it to me. You gave me 38. That is not fair either." "You do not understand," he said. "Running a household. A child costs money, Vera. Kristen's college cost $52,000, I said. From my trust. Did Kristen cost that or did I?" He did not answer. In the background, I heard a door open. I heard footsteps on the hardwood. Don Pauline's voice was sharp. "Who are you talking to?" "It is Vera," Don said. His voice was muffled like he had put his hand over the receiver. "She knows." There was a scuffling sound. "Knows what Don Pauline asked." Her voice was closer now. Then she spoke directly into the phone. "Vera, I do not know what you think you have found, but if you are making accusations—" "I am not making accusations," I said. "I am stating numbers. Numbers do not accuse Pauline, they just exist. We need to talk," she said. "In person. Tomorrow." "I do not think that is a good idea," I said. "Tomorrow," she snapped. "This family has always handled things together." Click. She hung up. Not Dawn. "Pauline." I lowered the phone. I looked at the blank screen. "This family has always handled things together." Translation. This family has always handled things the way Pauline wants them handled. I should not go. Margot would tell me not to go. Any rational person would tell me not to go. But I knew I would go. Because the 8-year-old girl standing outside the bedroom door never stopped hoping for a different answer. Sunday afternoon was gray. The sky was the color of wet concrete. I drove to Westerville on autopilot. I took exit 23 off the highway. I turned into the subdivision where the lawns were manicured and the secrets were kept behind beige siding. There were 3 cars in the driveway. Dawn's truck, Pauline's Lexus bought with Grace's money, and Kristen's Nissan. Kristen was there. My stomach dropped. This was not a conversation. This was a tribunal. The front door was unlocked. I walked in. The living room had been rearranged. 3 chairs were positioned in a semicircle facing the couch. Don sat in the middle. Pauline sat to his right. Kristen sat to his left. Kristen's eyes were red. She had been crying, or she had been told to look like she had been crying. Austin was standing in the kitchen doorway, his arms crossed over his chest. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. The couch was empty. It was waiting for me. I did not sit down. I stood in the entryway, keeping my coat on. I clutched my purse strap like a lifeline. I looked at them. 3 people who shared a last name with me. None of them shared my blood. None of them shared Grace. Behind them was the kitchen. Grace's kitchen, rebuilt with Grace's money. Vera, please sit, Pauline said. It was not an invitation. It was a command disguised as hospitality. I walked to the couch. I sat on the edge of the cushion. I crossed my legs. I put my hands in my lap, palms up so the face of the watch was visible. Vera. We want to understand what is happening, Pauline began. Her tone was measured, reasonable. You have not come to dinner in a month. You have been requesting financial documents behind our backs. This is not like you. What is like me, Pauline? I asked. You are the responsible one, she said. The calm one. This behavior is concerning. Don was staring at his hands. Your mother's insurance, he said. That money went to raising you. $420,000, I said. I received $38,000. I have done the math, Don. Where is the rest? Silence filled the room. Pauline shifted in her chair. She smoothed her skirt. This is exactly what I was afraid of, she said, turning to Kristen. Vera has always been fixated on money. It is not healthy. Kristen spoke up for the first time. Her voice trembled. Vera, you are scaring me, she said. Dad says you have been going through his private files. That is not normal. Those files contain my mother's insurance documents, I said. They are not his private files. They are my legal inheritance records. See, Pauline said, pointing a manicured finger at me. See? This is what I mean. Everything is about what is yours. What about what this family gave you? She leaned forward. Her eyes were hard. We gave you a home, she said. We gave you a family. You would be in foster care without us. The air left the room. Foster care. That was the line, the nuclear option. Be grateful we took you in. Be grateful you were not an orphan of the state. Your mother died and left you nothing but problems, and we solved them. I did not flinch. I had heard variations of this since I was 14. The forensic accountant let the words bounce off her armor, but underneath the daughter bled. Don looked up. His eyes were wet. Vera, I love you, he said. His voice broke. I raised you like my own, and now you are treating me like a criminal after everything I did. You are, I started to say. I stopped. I almost said it. You are a criminal. Kristen reached for Don's hand. Dad, she said. She looked at me. Vera, she is not thinking straight. She has been alone too much. We think you might need to talk to someone, Vera Pauline said. Her voice dripped with rehearsed concern. A professional. This obsession with money, the paranoia going through files. It is not healthy. We are worried about your stability. I looked at them. First they denied it. Then they attacked my character. Now they were reversing the roles. I was the aggressor. They were the victims. They were rewriting reality in real time. Then Kristen stood up. She walked over to me. She looked me in the eye. You are my sister, she said. She started to cry. Real tears. I do not care about adopted or not adopted, she said. You are my sister. And right now you are acting like we are your enemies. I looked at her face. She meant it. That was the worst part. Kristen believed what she was saying. She did not know about the ring. She did not know about the college fund. She did not know that the roof over her head, the degree on her wall, and the diamond on her finger all came from a woman named Grace who died 31 years ago. Kristen was not the villain. Kristen was the evidence. And I could not explain that without destroying her too. I stood up. I buttoned my coat. Nobody moved to stop me. Vera Don said from his chair, Please. I paused at the door. I looked back at him. You said, family does not steal from family, I said. Remember. Don's face went gray. It was the same gray I would see weeks later at the wedding. I remember too, I said. I walked out to my car. I got in. I drove to the end of the street and pulled over under a maple tree. I put my forehead on the steering wheel. For the first time in the entire investigation, I cried. Not the silent, shaking kind of crying. I sobbed. I cried like an 8-year-old girl who just realized the door was never going to open. Pauline worked fast. Within 48 hours, the narrative had been set. Vera was having a breakdown. Vera was obsessed with money. Vera was accusing Dawn of stealing because she was paranoid and ungrateful. My phone lit up. It was not calls from my family. It was calls about me. Tuesday morning, I received a text from Dawn's sister, Aunt Linda. "Vera, honey, your dad called. He is worried about you. We all are. Please do not do anything you cannot take back. Family is family." Wednesday afternoon, a voicemail from Mrs. Chen, Pauline's friend from church. "Vera, dear, I just heard and I want you to know everyone makes mistakes and holding grudges is not Christian. Your parents love you so much. Maybe you should pray about this." Wednesday night, a text from Kristen. "I do not know what is going on with you, but if you ruin my wedding, I will never forgive you. I mean it, Vera." Then a text from Austin. "Hey Vera, it is Austin. I do not fully understand what is happening, but I wanted you to know. I think there are two sides to everything. If you need to talk, I am here." I read Austin's text 3 times. He was the only one who acknowledged that another side might exist. I did not reply. I could not reply, but I did not delete it. I called Margot. "They are telling everyone I am mentally unstable," I said. Margot sighed. "Of course they are," she said. "It is a script, Vera. First they deny the theft, then they attack the person pointing it out. Then they switch places and pretend they are the ones being hurt. Knowing the tactic does not make it hurt less," I said. "No," she said softly. "It does not." Thursday night, 11:30. My apartment was dark. I had not turned on the lights in 2 days. The only illumination came from the blue glow of my laptop screen. The kitchen counter was cluttered. An unwashed mug with a ring of dried coffee at the bottom. A granola bar wrapper. I had stopped taking care of the space. I had stopped taking care of myself. The folder labeled Grace was open on the screen. I had read the documents 4 times that day. I was not looking for numbers anymore. I was looking for something else. I was looking for a reason. On the counter next to the unwashed mug sat the watch. I had taken it off. My wrist felt naked. There was a pale strip of skin where the leather strap had sat for 24 years. It looked vulnerable. I stared at the laptop. I have a federal case file. I have 30 years of documentation. I have the truth. They have a story. They have a family. They have each other. The math did not add up the way I thought it would. I thought evidence equaled victory. But evidence in a family is not evidence. It is betrayal. The more proof I had, the more they hated me. I wanted justice. I got isolation. I wanted Grace's money back. I got Grace's loneliness instead. What died that night in the dark apartment was not the hope for justice. The IRS case was real. Neil was real. What died was the fantasy. I realized that I had spent 4 months proving Don stole from me because I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to see the competent woman, the forensic accountant, the daughter who turned out fine despite him. I wanted to hand him a binder and have him say, "You are brilliant. I should have protected you. I am sorry. I wanted numbers to make a father love me." But in that living room with Pauline's hand on his arm, he had looked at me like I was a virus. I traced $382,000 to prove I mattered. All I proved was that I did not. Not to them. I closed the laptop. I laid down on the couch and stared at the ceiling. I was too tired to count the cracks. My eyes drifted to the kitchen shelf, to the books, to the tax guides. And in the corner, sitting in the shadows, was a small wooden box. Dark oak. Grace's recipe box. And in the corner of my counter where I had set it down the night I took it from Dawn's kitchen was a small wooden box. Dark oak. Grace's recipe box. I had grabbed it without thinking that last Sunday, like a soldier pulling a flag from a burning building. I had not opened it since. I had looked at the recipes once years ago at Dawn's house, but seeing Grace's handwriting had hurt too much. I reached up and took it down from the shelf. The wood was warm from the heat of the stove. "Mom's box," I said. "What Pauline called from the living room." I tucked it under my arm. I took my coat from the hook. I walked out the door. I sat up. I walked into the kitchen. The floor tiles were cold against my bare feet. I reached up and took the box down. It was heavy. It smelled of old paper and memory. I set it on the counter. I opened the lid. I flipped through the cards. Chocolate chip pancakes, lemon bars, pot roast. I reached the back of the box. My finger brushed against the bottom. It moved. The wood at the bottom of the box shifted. It tilted under the pressure of my finger. I froze. I pushed it again. It was not the bottom of the box. It was a panel. I used my fingernail to pry up the edge. The wood popped up. There was a space underneath, a hidden compartment maybe 1/4 of an inch deep. And inside the space, there was a letter. I sat on the cold tile of my kitchen floor with the recipe box in my lap. The morning light was just starting to bleed through the east window, turning the room a bruised shade of gray. It was Friday morning. I had not slept in a bed for 3 nights. My stomach growled. It was a loud, demanding sound in the silent apartment. I realized I was hungry. Actually hungry. For days I had existed on adrenaline and grief, but now my body was reminding me that I was still alive. I looked down at the box. Dark oak. Brass hinges that had tarnished over time. I had avoided opening it for years because seeing the handwriting inside hurt too much. I lifted the lid. The index cards were jammed inside. Chocolate chip pancakes, pot roast, lemon bars. Each card was stained with evidence of use. A smudge of butter, a drop of vanilla extract, a splatter of tomato sauce. These were the artifacts of a woman who had lived in a kitchen who had cooked and fed a baby she would not live to raise. I pulled out the divider labeled desserts. I went to put the cards back, but they did not sit right. The bottom of the box felt too high. I pushed down on the wood panel at the base. It wobbled. I leaned closer. I used my fingernail to pry at the edge of the wood. It lifted easily. It was a false bottom hiding a space no deeper than 1/4 of an inch. Lying in that shallow grave was a cream envelope. It was yellowed with age. There was no stamp. On the front, written in purple ink that had faded but not vanished, were 2 lines. "For Vera, when she is old enough to understand." My hands started to shake. I had held federal subpoenas and evidence of million-dollar fraud without flinching. I had looked my father in the eye while he lied to me and kept my face still. But this envelope made me tremble so hard, I had to set the box down on the floor to open it. The paper inside was thin. The date at the top was 31 years ago. My sweet girl. If you are reading this, I am gone, and you are old enough to understand what I am about to tell you. I am leaving you everything I have. It is not a fortune, but it is enough to give you choices. Choices I didn't have. I need you to know something about Don. He is a good man. He has a good heart. But he has a weak spine. He loves you, I know he does. I can see it when he holds you, but he will choose the easy path over the right one every time. That is who he is. I married him knowing that. If he remarries, and he will because he cannot be alone, the woman he chooses may not love you the way I do. Nobody will love you the way I do. That is not a tragedy. That is just the truth about mothers. Here is what I need you to hear. You are not what they give you. You are not the money. You are not the attention. You are not the place at the table. You are what I made. You are Sunday mornings and chocolate chips and that sound you make when you laugh, that sounds like water over rocks. If the money is gone when you read this, and it might be because Dawn is weak, and weak men lose things, then know this. The money was never the point. You were the point. You were always the point. Do not spend your life counting what they took from you. Count what I gave you. A name. A start. And the knowledge that once before anything else happened you were loved completely. I love you. I love you. I love you. Mom. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time. I pulled the paper against my chest and curled forward until my forehead touched my knees. I did not scream. I did not sob. I just let the air out of my lungs. Do not spend your life counting what they took from you. That was exactly what I had done. For 4 months. 25 tabs, 1,847 rows. I had been counting theft. I had been tallying up the deficit of love in my life, trying to prove that Dawn owed me a balance. Count what I gave you. I looked at the letter. The purple ink was blurry through my tears. She had given me a name. Vera Grace Sutton. She had given me a warning. She had known 3 decades ago that Dawn would fail. She had not written it with hate. She had written it with clarity. I had spent my whole life trying to get Dawn to see me the way Grace saw me. I wanted him to value me. But Grace already saw me. Grace saw me first. She hid a letter in a recipe box just to make sure that one day when the noise of the world got too loud, I would hear her voice. I did not need Dawn to look at me with pride. I had Grace's words. I did not need $382,000 to prove I was worthy. I sat there while the sun came up, fully turning the gray light to gold. It was April, and the world was finally deciding to be spring. I stood up. My knees cracked. I walked to the bathroom and washed my face. I looked in the mirror. The eyes staring back were gray-blue. They were her eyes. I went back to the kitchen. I took out the card for scrambled eggs. Salt, pepper, butter, love. I turned on the stove. I cracked 2 eggs. I added the butter. I added the love. Then I sat down at my laptop. I closed 23 of the 25 tabs. I kept the master evidence file open because Neil needed it, and the law was the law. But I closed the net worth analysis. I closed the ring trace. I opened a blank document. I typed a new title. What I want to say. Saturday morning, I drove to Margot's house. I had never been there before. I had never been invited. I simply looked up her address in the company directory and drove. Margot opened the door in a thick white bathrobe holding a mug of coffee. Her hair was down messy from sleep. She looked at me standing on her porch. "This is either very good or very bad," she said. I held up the letter. She stepped back to let me in. We sat at her kitchen table. It was made of glass and chrome, very different from the warm wood of my memories. Margot read the letter in silence. She put it down. She took off her glasses and cleaned them on the lapel of her robe. "Your mother was smarter than both of us," she said. "I am still going through with the IRS case," I said. "That is real. Dawn committed a crime and it has consequences." "I am not dropping that," good Margot said. "But I am not going to the wedding to destroy them," I said. That is what the old Vera would do. Old Vera would walk in with a binder and a projector and turn Kristen's reception into an audit presentation. Margot smiled a small, genuine thing. "I liked old Vera's plan," she admitted. "Old Vera's plan was about making Dawn see her," I said. "New Vera does not need Dawn to see her. Grace saw her. That is enough." "So what is the new plan?" she asked. "I am going to say Grace's name," I said. "In that house. At that wedding. In front of everyone. I am going to say who paid for it. Not to punish. To acknowledge. Grace funded their lives and nobody has said her name at that dinner table in 20 years. I took a breath. "And then I am going to leave," I said. "Not storm out. Not slam doors. Just leave. I will walk to my car. I will drive home. I will cook Grace's scrambled eggs. And I will stop counting." "And Neil?" she asked. "Neil does what Neil does," I said. "The legal case is separate. Dawn broke the law. Consequences follow." "But that is Neil's job. My job is to say my mother's name. I am not paying for the wedding," I added. "Obviously." "Kristen's wedding." Margot started. Will happen regardless. I finished. Pauline will find the money. Pauline always finds the money. It is just usually mine. Margot stood up. She walked to a wine rack in the corner and pulled out a bottle. She poured 2 glasses even though it was 10 o'clock in the morning. I wish I had had your mother's letter when I was your age, she said. You had your own version, I said. You just had to write it yourself. She raised her glass. To Grace, she said. To Grace, I said. The next 5 weeks passed in a blur of quiet activity. I went back to work. I finished 3 client audits. I moved through the office with a calmness that unsettled people. Margot told me I was different. She said I used to be efficient and dead, and now I was efficient and calm. Neil called me for updates. The investigation was proceeding. He told me he would have preliminary findings by mid-May. If you are attending an event where the subject will be present, I should know, he said. I told him about the wedding. I see, he said. It was that specific federal agent tone that meant 40 different things. I did not call Dawn. Dawn did not call me. 5 weeks of silence. It was the longest we had gone without speaking since I was 8 years old. I cooked every night. I made the lemon bars. I made the pot roast. My apartment started to smell like butter and thyme. My neighbor knocked on my door one Tuesday to ask what smelled so amazing. I gave her a plate of lemon bars. I went shopping. I did not go to the discount rack. I went to a boutique in the short north. I bought a dress. It was not navy blue. It was not black. It was pale yellow, the color of daisies. My mother's favorite color. The night before the wedding, I laid the dress out on my bed. I put the Polaroid of Grace on the nightstand face up so she could see the ceiling. I put the letter in my clutch. I would carry her words into that room. I looked at my wrist. The watch was still there. It was still ticking 3 minutes behind the rest of the world. I touched the scratched crystal. I would deal with that tomorrow. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Kristen. Please do not make a scene tomorrow. Please. I am begging you. I looked at the words. She was terrified. She thought I was coming to burn the house down. She did not understand that you do not need fire to create light. I typed back. I will be there. I will not make a scene. I promise. I meant it. What I was going to do was not a scene. It was a correction. I turned off the lamp. The room went dark, but for the first time in months, it did not feel empty. Tomorrow was the wedding. Tomorrow was the yellow dress. Tomorrow was the truth. The afternoon sun over Brookside Manor was a heavy liquid gold. It was mid-May in Ohio, the kind of day that tricked you into believing winter would never come back. The dogwood trees lining the drive were in full riotous bloom, dropping white petals onto the asphalt like confetti. I sat in my Honda Civic in the parking lot. The engine was off, the windows were down. I could smell cut grass and diesel fumes, and the expensive perfume of 100 guests making their way toward the chapel. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I was not wearing navy blue. I was not wearing the armor of the forensic accountant. I was wearing pale yellow. It was a simple sundress linen the color of the daisies my mother used to plant along the front walk. My hair was down resting on my shoulders. Grace had worn her hair down. I checked my wrist. The watch was there. The leather strap was warm against my skin. The second hand ticked comfortably 3 minutes behind the rest of the world. Today, I was running on Grace's time. I opened my clutch. Inside, tucked into the silk pocket, was the cream envelope. Next to it was the Polaroid. I ran my thumb over the edge of the photo. I am ready, I whispered. I got out of the car. I walked toward the chapel, my heels sinking slightly into the softened asphalt. I sat in the back row. I had not asked for a seat assignment. I just chose the pew furthest from the altar where the shadows were cool. I watched them walk down the aisle. Kristen looked stunning in white, a cloud of tulle and lace. The ring on her finger caught the light from the stained glass windows, sending sharp prisms of color dancing across the walls. 2.1 carats of my mother's trust fund sparkling in the house of God. I did not feel anger. I waited for it, but it did not come. Instead, I felt a strange, quiet pity. Not for Kristen, but for the ring itself. It was a beautiful object trapped in a lie. Austin said his vows. His voice was steady earnest. He was a good man walking into a minefield without a map. I looked at Don in the front row. He was wearing a tuxedo that seemed a size too large, as if he had shrunk in the last 5 weeks. His shoulders were caved in. He wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. Pauline sat next to him, her hand gripping his forearm. It looked like support, but I knew it was an anchor. She was holding him down, not holding him up. The ceremony ended. The organ swelled. The guests flooded out into the sunlight. I made my way to the reception hall. The ballroom was cavernous, draped in lilac silk. Pauline had chosen lilac. Grace had hated lilac. She said it smelled like old ladies and funerals. I found table 9. It was tucked in the back corner near the service doors, just as I knew it would be. I sat down. The chair was gold-painted wood, slightly wobbly. I scanned the room. Table 14 was near the center, positioned perfectly to see the head table but blend into the crowd. A man in a blue blazer and khaki pants sat there. He was drinking water. His wife was beside him, making polite conversation with a cousin from Austin's side. Neil Whitfield. He saw me. He gave a nod so small it might have been a muscle twitch. It was real. The binder I had handed him in Cincinnati was now a presence in the room. He was not here as a guest. He was here as a consequence. Austin walked by my table on his way to the front. He paused when he saw me. He looked tired. "Vera," he said, keeping his voice low. "Thanks for coming." "I know it is. I know." "Congratulations, Austin," I said. "Kristen is lucky." He hesitated. He looked toward the head table where Pauline was directing the photographer. "Listen," he said. "Whatever happened between you and the family, I just want you to know I asked Kristen to put you at the head table. She said Pauline vetoed it." I smiled. It was a genuine smile. "I know," I said. "It is okay. I am exactly where I need to be." He squeezed my shoulder. Then he walked away, disappearing into the sea of guests. Dinner was served. The filet mignon was excellent. It should be. It cost $47,000 of Grace's money. I ate. I tasted the rosemary in the potatoes. I tasted the butter on the rolls. I sat in the corner of the room wearing yellow, eating a meal paid for by a ghost, and I felt completely calm. The toasts began. The best man told a story about a fishing trip. The maid of honor cried. Kristen began to make her rounds. She moved through the room like a queen, her arm linked through Austin's. She stopped at every table accepting praise, laughing that breathless, happy laugh. I watched her get closer. Table 7. Table 8. Then table 9. She stopped. She swayed slightly, her champagne glass tilting. Her cheeks were flushed. She looked at me, and for a second her smile faltered. Then she pasted it back on. "Vera," she said. Her voice carried over the low hum of conversation. "Oh my God, I did not even see you back here." "Congratulations, Kristen," I said. She leaned in. The scent of expensive perfume and champagne washed over me. "You know what, actually?" she said, her voice dropping to a stage whisper. "This table is kind of reserved for Austin's family now. His uncle just showed up. We are short on seats." She glanced back at the head table. Pauline was watching. Pauline gave a nod. "You do not mind finding another spot, right?" Kristen said, turning back to me. She laughed a bright, brittle sound. "Just go find another table, adopted girl. There is plenty of room in the back." "Adopted girl." The words hung in the air. The people at table 8 turned to look. A few of them chuckled, that nervous, obedient laughter of people who want to be in on the joke. I looked at Kristen. Once that phrase would have gutted me. I would have felt the blood drain from my face. I would have felt the 8-year-old girl standing outside the bedroom door waiting for her father to defend her. But today, I heard it differently. Grace did not adopt me. Grace made me. Grace carried me. Grace named me. Grace loved me for 5 years and then died fighting to stay 1 minute longer. I was not an adopted girl. I was Grace's daughter. And I was the only person in this room who remembered that. I stood up. I did not move fast. I moved with the hydraulic slowness of heavy machinery. I picked up my champagne glass. "Actually, Kristen," I said, "before I move." She stopped, turning away. She looked back at me confused. "I would like to say something," I said. "It will only take a moment." My voice was not loud, but it had a frequency that cut through the chatter. The tables nearby went quiet. The silence spread outward like a ripple in a pond, until the entire ballroom was looking at table 9. Don looked up from his plate. His face went gray. He knew. He did not know what, but he knew something was coming. Pauline stood up halfway, her hand gripping the edge of the head table. I held my glass up. The crystal caught the light from the chandeliers. "I want to toast someone who is not here today," I said. "Someone whose name has not been said in this family for a very long time." Pauline's fork hit her plate with a sharp clatter. "Her name was Grace," I said. "Grace Ellison. She was my mother." Don closed his eyes. It was the flinch of a man struck by a physical blow. "Grace died 31 years ago," I continued. "She was 29. She left behind a 5-year-old daughter and a life insurance policy and a letter in a recipe box that I found 3 weeks ago." I reached into my clutch with my free hand. I pulled out the cream envelope. I held it up. I did not open it. I just let them see the purple handwriting on the front. In her letter, she told me that Don was a good man with a weak spine, I said. She was right about both things. A sound escaped Don's throat, a low, strangled noise. "Grace left $420,000 for my education, my first home, my future," I said. "She wrote all of it, and she wrote please, because she knew Don was weak. And she was right." I lowered the letter. I looked at Kristen. "Not a dollar of that money came to me," I said. "It went to this house's renovation. It went to Kristen's college tuition. And..." I looked at the ring. I did not point. I just let my gaze rest on the diamond. Kristen looked at her hand. Then she looked at me. Her mouth opened. "And 2 other things," I said. The room was deadly silent. "I am not here to make a scene," I said. I promised Kristen I would not. "I am here to say my mother's name in a room that forgot it. Her name was Grace. She loved me. She paid for all of this, and she deserved to be remembered." I set the champagne glass down on the table. The liquid settled golden and untouched. I walked toward the head table. The guests parted for me. I could hear the rustle of silk, the intake of breath. I stopped in front of Don. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet, red-rimmed, terrified. I reached for my left wrist. I unclasped the buckle of the leather strap. I took off the watch. It was warm from my skin. The crystal face was scratched. The leather was worn smooth by 24 years of pulse and sweat. I placed it on the white tablecloth in front of him. It made a heavy, final sound. "This runs 3 minutes slow," I said. "I never fixed it because you gave it to me and I did not want to change anything you gave me." I reached into my clutch one last time. I pulled out the Polaroid. Grace holding me. I placed it next to the watch. "I do not need it anymore," I said. "You can keep this too. I have her letter." "That is enough." Don reached out a trembling hand. He touched the edge of the photo. He looked at Grace's face. "Vera," he whispered. It was a broken sound. "You were a good father for about 6 years," I said. Grace asked for more. "You could not give it. That is yours to carry now, not mine." I turned around. It was done. I had said her name. I had returned the time. I started walking toward the exit. Click, click, click. I was 3 steps away from the double doors when I heard the chair scrape. At table 14, Neil Whitfield stood up. He buttoned his blue blazer. He adjusted his glasses. He walked toward the head table with a stride that was neither hurried nor hesitant. "Mr. Sutton," he called out. Don looked up confused, clutching the Polaroid. Neil reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a leather case and flipped it open. The silver badge caught the light bright and cold. "I am Special Agent Neil Whitfield, IRS Criminal Investigation," he said. His voice was polite, the voice of a man asking for directions. "I understand this is a difficult time, but I will need approximately 1 hour of your time. Monday morning, 9 o'clock, at our Cincinnati field office." He placed a business card on the table. It lay there in a row. The broken watch, the dead woman's photo, and the federal agent's card. Don's face went slack. It was the look of a man whose bill had finally arrived. Every ledger, every hidden cost, due immediately. Pauline stood up. She gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time in her life, Pauline Sutton had nothing to say. Kristen stared at her ring. Then she looked at her father. "Dad," she said. Her voice was high-frightened. "Dad, what is he talking about?" I did not stay to hear the answer. I pushed open the double doors. I walked out into the lobby. I walked out into the parking lot. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the asphalt. I got into my car. I started the engine. I drove away. I did not look in the rearview mirror. My apartment was quiet. The evening light filtered through the blinds, painting stripes of orange and gray across the floor. I had changed out of the yellow dress. I was wearing a soft cotton t-shirt and sweatpants. My feet were bare against the cool tile of the kitchen. On the counter, the recipe box was open. The index cards were fanned out. The stove was on. A pan hissed gently as a knob of butter melted, turning from yellow to nut brown. I cracked 2 eggs into a bowl. I whisked them with a fork. I put my phone on the counter. I pressed play. "You Are My Sunshine" filled the room. It was the Jimmy Davis version, the one with the scratchy fiddle, the one Grace used to sing. My wrist felt light. I looked down at it. There was a pale strip of skin where the watch had been. It looked new. It looked like it was breathing for the first time in 2 decades. I poured the eggs into the pan. My phone rang. "Margot," I picked it up. "I am cooking," I said. "You are cooking," she repeated. She knew what that meant. "Grace's scrambled eggs," I said. "The recipe says love. I am adding extra." Margot laughed. It was a real laugh, warm and deep. I had heard Margot laugh maybe 5 times in 6 years. "What happened?" she asked. I said her name. I said. And then I left. There was a silence on the line. Just that she asked. Just that I said. And then a man in a blue blazer stood up and showed Don his badge. Oh, Vera Margot sighed. "It was not dramatic," I said, stirring the eggs. "It was procedural. Very IRS. "How do you feel?" she asked. I stopped stirring. I looked out the window at the city lights blinking on. "Light," I said. "I feel light. Like I put down a bag I have been carrying since I was 8 years old." My phone buzzed against my ear. A text coming in. I pulled the phone away to look. "Kristen, I do not understand any of this, but I took off the ring. I need to talk to you. Not today, but soon." I read it twice. Kristen took off the ring. Another text popped up. "Austin, whatever you need, we are here, both of us." I did not reply. Not tonight. Tonight was for the eggs. Tonight was for the music. I checked for a text from Don. Nothing. Don had nothing left to say. Or perhaps he had too much. I checked for a text from Pauline. Nothing. I plated the eggs. I buttered a piece of toast. I sat down at my small kitchen table. I thought about the opening image of this story. Me sitting at table 9 watching a family that was not mine celebrate with money that was. I had been alone. I had been counting. Now I was sitting in my kitchen. My feet were bare. The room smelled of butter and safety. I was alone, but I was not lonely. On Monday, Neil would sit across from Don and open a federal case file. Don would see numbers he had spent 30 years hiding. Pauline would hire a lawyer they could not afford. Kristen would learn where her college tuition came from. The system would move, slowly, thoroughly. That was not my job anymore. I had handed the binder to the people who carried binders for a living. My job was to eat these eggs. My job was to listen to this song. I am 36 years old. My wrist is bare. My apartment smells like Sunday morning. And somewhere in a recipe box on my counter between the pancakes and the lemon bars, my mother is still telling me she loves me in purple ink. I did not need $382,000. I just needed to know it was always mine.